Welcome everyone to this online discussion on rebuilding Ukraine, navigating a sustainable recovery and EU candidacy. This event is organized by IISD, or the International Institute for Sustainable Development, and RISE Ukraine. IISD is a global sustainability think tank working, among others, on energy, resilience, water, and sustainable infrastructure. RISE Ukraine is a coalition of more than 40 Ukrainian and international NGOs working to help Ukraine build back better, making the reconstruction a model of integrity, sustainability, and efficiency. We are very fortunate today to be joined by an extraordinary panel of experts, and throughout the discussions, participants are invited to raise questions through the Q&A box function. So this is not the chat function, but the Q&A box function at the bottom of your screen. We will attempt to integrate the questions into our discussions. I will be your moderator today. My name is Natalie Bernasconi, and I'm the interim CEO of the International Institute for Sustainable Development. So why are we talking about rebuilding Ukraine today? While Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine continues, Ukraine has already started rebuilding and planning its reconstruction. The latest cost of reconstruction and recovery is estimated at more than $400 billion. Many countries have already committed to helping Ukraine rebuild. The European Union is expected to be at the heart of these processes, especially considering Ukraine is now an EU candidate country. However, there is growing interest in Ukraine to not simply rebuild what existed before, but to build back better. This is considerable support, and there is considerable support and interest for ensuring the recovery and reconstruction supports economic, social, and environmental goals. This was very clearly highlighted in the Ukraine government's draft recovery plan presented last year in Lugano, Switzerland. And sustainability was also highlighted in the outcome document of the Lugano conference, the Lugano Declaration, which was signed by many governments and which put forward 7 principles of Ukraine's recovery process. Now, there are some understandable concerns that a focus on sustainability could mean delays and added costs for the reconstruction. Clearly, Ukrainians need roads, buildings, schools, and all the other critical infrastructure required to ensure people are able to safely return to their hometowns. And they need all of this as fast as possible. Our panel will explore both the opportunities and challenges for achieving the twin objectives of ensuring a rapid recovery and at the same time supporting the country's interest in building back better, more sustainably. We will also hear about the Ukraine's government's recovery priorities and how the global community can help rebuild a sustainable and resilient Ukraine, as well as support its path toward EU membership. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to turn to our esteemed speakers for today's event, and we will begin with the keynote address by Mr. Tanil Tang. Mr. Tang is team leader, interinstitutional coordination of relief and reconstruction, Ukraine service, with the Directorate General for Neighborhood and Enlargement Negotiations, or DG NEAR, at the European Commission. Mr. Tang, last year, the Commission announced the establishment of the Rebuild Ukraine facility to support the reconstruction of the country And in January this year, the EU launched the multi-agency donor coordination platform to support Ukraine's repair, recovery, and reconstruction process. Could you share with us how the EU will handle Ukraine's accession into the EU, the country's reconstruction, and the implementation of the European Green Deal all at the same time? Thank you for laying the ground for our conversation today. The floor is yours, Mr. Tang.
Thank you very much, Natalie, and good afternoon, colleagues and friends. And it's my pleasure to participate in this event today. Let me say by the outset that we will support Ukraine as long as it takes to win this war, and we hope that Ukraine will win, and Ukraine will win soon. Now, when it comes to the three main points that I would like to make for the introduction of this event, I would first like to say that it is indeed so, as you pointed out, Natalie, also at the beginning of your intervention, that the EU has committed to play a substantial role in the reconstruction of Ukraine. And when we talk about reconstruction, we mean building back better Ukraine, according to the European Union standards and core principles. And this, of course, includes also European Green Deal, but also, for example, digital transformation and socially inclusive development. As you are aware, we have mobilized already rather substantial support since the beginning of the war. At the moment, this is at around 68 billion euros. And we have also said that we will support Ukraine now in the margins of the short-term recovery. Our president and our commissioner Varhey announced during the important meetings in February that additional 1 billion euros will be mobilized. And of course, this is very much taken into account the recent rapid damage needs assessment by World Bank, to which we also contributed. And it's also clear that Green Deal or environment aspects are something of an horizontal priority when addressing those needs by the European Commission and also by the other international donors. Now, the second point that I would like to shortly address is related to the enlargement track. Ukraine became the candidate country in June. And it's a big recognition of the Ukraine's progress in reforms and approximation with the EU so far. But at the same time, it is also setting a bar rather high for Ukraine, because it's clear that if Ukraine wants to progress further on this European accession track, it also has to comply with European standards, including in the area of environment and Green Deal. And of course, from our side, we want to support Ukraine as much as possible in this. It's also partly our responsibility that Ukraine becomes successful European Union member states one day. So we will take this into account. European Commission issued a report where Ukraine stands in aligning its legislation with the EU in February. It covered many sectors, many areas, and environment was one of them. And actually, we saw that while some progress has been made, there are still some challenges that need to be addressed. And we will organize a bit more comprehensive exercise this year. There will be a big enlargement report which will also cover the chapters related to the environment and Green Deal. Now, the third point that I wanted to make relates to the cooperation with our Ukrainian partners. This includes government, this includes local governments, but also civil society organizations. And this is for us very important that there is a local engagement in those policy areas. When it comes to our cooperation with Ukraine, we established already in year 2021 the so-called Green Dialogue, which basically helps us to discuss Ukraine's priorities. It helps us to inform Ukraine about our recent initiatives, legislative initiatives, but also a place where we could elaborate on how we could support further Ukraine in this area. And this happened, of course, before the Russian aggression started, and something that we will need to review when we return to the peace in Ukraine. And then something very important for us is, of course, the engagement with civil society organizations. Ukraine has a very vibrant civic space as a whole, but also very strong civil society organizations in the area of Green Deal and environment. And we hope that with engagement with them, and also through the engagement of the Ukrainian government with them in Ukraine, we will help to contribute to this very much Green Deal-led reconstruction of Ukraine. Thanks a lot for your attention, and I'm happy if I can participate in the further discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tang. This provides a perfect segue to our panel discussion. It provides a really strong background. And I would like to first introduce our speakers coming in now. We have Mr. Alexei Ryabchin. He is strategic advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister for the European and Euro-Atlantic integration of Ukraine. We have Mr. Vladislav Rashkovan, who is alternate executive director of the IMF. We have Ms. Svetlana Kolomyets, who is coordinator of the Capacity Building Office of the State Agency for Restoration and Development of Infrastructure of Ukraine. We have Mr. Sviatoslav Pavliuk, who is head of the Association Energy Efficient Cities of Ukraine. And finally, we have our Anna Ackerman, who is policy analyst on the green reconstruction of Ukraine at IISD, and also board member of the Ukrainian NGO EcoAction. So I am very much looking forward to this discussion. And I would like to begin with Mr. Ryabchin. Alexei, in June 2022, the European Council granted Ukraine the status of a candidate for accession to the EU. Ukraine's Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal announced recently that Ukraine's plans are to be fully ready to join the European Union by end of 2024, so very ambitious. And this very ambitious task for the country and for your government, what are your priorities at the moment in designing reconstruction frameworks while moving toward the EU integration? Over to you,
hello,
Alex.
Hello, dear colleagues. Thank you for hosting this beautiful event on a very topical agenda for Ukraine. I would say yes, of course, I will support my prime minister, my president, on a very ambitious target that they are setting for everybody who involved in European integration. We know that it's a very hard choice, and even though if it takes a bit longer trip to join the European Union, like we will go and this journey, because all of our soldiers are fighting for the future of our country in European Union with all the rules and regulation. And like if it's to speak about the topic of our panel, I would say that like before the full-scale war that started in 2022, Ukraine demonstrated a really big climate ambition and leadership within the region. So we adopted the most ambitious NDCs, National Determined Contribution. So our climate pledge till 2030, and it for the first time was about a real reduction, like 65% till 1990. So it was not about a hot air selling, which left over from the Soviet Union legacy, but about a real reduction. We align our policies with the European Green Deal. We are not yet a part of the EU, but we join and like align our policies, starting to implement some of the Green Deal activity. We pledge to be climate neutral country till 2060, understanding that when we will join the European Union, this pledge might be revised till 2050. So it's quite an ambitious stuff. Our companies started to declare their climate neutrality and be engaged in internal decarbonization and new green businesses like hydrogen, biofuel, biomethane, and many, many others. So we were designing the emission trading system, a lot of things going on, and the Russian aggression, unfortunately stopped all this ambitious plan. Moreover, currently under the Russian occupation, temporarily, a lot of green energy assets in Kherson, Mykolaiv, Zaporizhia, and other regions that is close to the Black Sea and Azov Sea. There are a lot of assets that has been now, we don't know what is their future. And it's really hard to tell about any climate and green activity while you have your country burned out, your forests are being destroyed, your cities are being destroyed, and the most polluted areas are the Russian tanks and missiles that emit not only CO2 but pollute the water and the land, and etc. But from the positive news, I would say that we do understand that this is a huge challenges, but like opportunities for us finally to use the opportunity to rebuild our country with the investments and grants and credits and all of this international support that is being granted and promised. And for us, it's a chance to leapfrog and to build back better, to do it more sustainably and clearer. Nowadays we're speaking about surviving the winter, basically surviving the war. So it's not about the recovery. It's not pledged to any kind of a green activity, and it's clear. But nevertheless, I know a huge amount of people in the government, in the presidential administration, in the parliament and the civil society thinking about the way how to build back better, how to recover in more greener and cleaner way, not only for the public sector and for the regions to restore, rebuild more energy efficient building, etc., but how to attract the private investments to make business out of it. And I would stop here. On this positive news, there are a lot of challenges, of course. So, for example, I bet that Svetlana Kolomyts from the Restoration Ministry will tell that you have a choice between fast recovery of buildings for the people in need and more energy efficient needs, which might take a bit longer, a bit expensive as a capex, but for opex for people will be much cheaper. So it will be much more cheaper to afford this flat. So you have these policy options, more greener but like longer and maybe a bit more expensive, or like faster cheaper, but not so sustainable. And this is also the way that I would like to discuss within a panel.
Yeah, thank you very much, Oleksiy. And of course, sometimes options look more expensive, but when you actually calculate what it means over the lifetime of the asset, we'll see that it isn't more expensive. But this is an immediate kind of difference between the policy options that and the benefits of long-term value is not always so clear. So thank you for that background and also sharing your plans before the aggression and your situation now. So thank you very much for that. And now we have the pleasure to turn to Vladislav Rashkovan, who is the alternative executive director at the IMF. Vladislav, on March 31st, the IMF approved a financial arrangement for Ukraine amounting to $15.6 billion over 4 years through 2027. And the intention is to support the authorities' policies, to stabilize the economy as the war continues, and also to allow for more expansive reforms to speed recovery once the war winds down. What are the most important reforms lying ahead of Ukraine that should help to provide economic growth, rebuild productive capacity, and recover living standards? What is your view on this, Vladislav?
Thanks, Natalia. Thanks not only for inviting and raising the topic of building back better of Ukraine, but also bringing back together best friends. Alexei, Svetlana, nice to meet you. We need to look at 4 stages actually, and which is a fast recovery. Alexei just now said about that. Reconstruction, which is mostly reconstruction of physical infrastructure. Modernization, which also will make Ukraine more more innovative and more addressing the global issues as well, and the EU accession. The problem for us is that all these processes, they are not consequent. They are going in parallel, and reforms to address or support all these stages. And some of the reforms which are needed, they look backwards, to fix the past problems, including the most recent one linked with the war. And I would clearly say about the anti-corruption reform, which is also within the European Union accession is raised as one of the most important elements. And Lugano principles, which you mentioned, Natalie, was also mentioning that. But it's very interesting that RISE Ukraine is building up the digital system, which also should bring more transparency over the reconstruction process. And in general, the previous reforms which we did in Ukraine, also with help of Alexei, Svetlana, and others, also substantially reduced the corruption in general. Clearly, still a long path to go. The regulation is also important reform to look backwards. If you put today $10 billion for the ruined city, unfortunately, you will not be able to fully use it and to rebuild the city fast, because the Ukraine is a super regulated country, and as you might know, according to World Bank doing report, we are lagging behind in such areas like connecting to electricity, to the water supply, to sewage, and so clearly these issues to be addressed now, much before we start, full reconstruction speed. Tax reform, and this is not about not only decreasing taxes, not necessary, is mostly improving the governance and improving the institutions around the tax, customs office, and other economic security areas in Ukraine. Fiscal reform in general, and this is where the IMF is coming. If you look at the IMF report, which you mentioned now, the program, and this program is 15.6 billion, but this program, actually unlocking for us the total package of $115 billion, which is committed by G7 countries, including by European Union. And this is mostly for the let's say, baseline scenario and downside scenario without big part of reconstruction, because IMF is not a development bank. We work mostly on macro side, but from macro side, fiscal reforms will be very important. Again, looking backwards, because as a part of the war, the deficit substantially increased. The government public finances are unbalanced, and we need to work in order to bring them back to the regular rails. And Minister of Finance does a great job to do it. Monetary reform. Monetary policy reforms, again, Ukraine did a great job before the war. Unfortunately, the war led again to high inflation and devaluation. The central bank had to peg a fixed rate, and clearly we need to go back in the next years to inflation targeting, and again to floating exchange regime. Other reforms you can easily see in the IMF report, but again, all of them address the previous problems, and they will not make us as differentiator in Europe. If Ukraine wants to play a bigger role and to go faster with European Union accession, we need to do something different. And Alexei now said about that Ukraine is already living with a concept of EU Green Deal, and I think we need to be brave to do this in many other areas. So we need already to behave like we are already EU member, in many areas. It's difficult, I know, but if tomorrow we are in the European Union, it will be already also difficult. And we don't want to be the poor relative or poorest relative in the family, in the European family. So in order to do that, I think we need to be open to experimentation. We need to show, for example, reconstruction, and this is going back to Build Back Better. It's a great opportunity. Yes, it's a tragedy, but it's a great opportunity. The tragedy is a war, but the great opportunity to work on rebuilding the cities, factually not using the Soviet legacy, but building them really green. What if we build the first fully green city in Europe? Can you imagine how much investments it will bring, ESG funds and attention in Europe? What if Izum will become such a city, or Borodianka will become a city, fully green, with really the most, not strict, but the most green standards, and maybe not only green, but also digital standards. Another city could be a smart city, but not as like it built in some Middle East countries where you have only concrete, and self-driving cars. I mean, you can make it really smart to be inclusive for many groups of people, to make a city livable. And this is a lot to be done on urban planning, on digital, on green together, but also on energy efficiency. Alexei again also said about that. We need to do, as maximum as possible for energy efficiency. Ukraine was one of the most energy inefficient country in the world, and still, as I said, deregulation. I think one of our tasks is to be integrated to European value chains. For that, we need to do everything possible to bring the foreign private capital, mostly European private capital, to Ukraine, and because the major money for Ukrainian growth and increasing productivity capacity are not coming from reconstruction per se. Reconstruction is a need, but from the FDIs, which will come after that. And this is an important element which we need to work all together, hoping to make Ukraine really greener and more digital. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Vladislav. And I think what was interesting with your intervention is that you gave this macro economic background, and also the need, to have strong fiscal policies and frameworks in place, because of course, for reconstruction, we do need those revenues, those taxes from the government side, which will also help attract, innovative private investment from other corners. So thank you very much for that, because what you also stated, and what we can come back to a little bit, is how, thinking green and thinking about innovation in the green space and in urban planning will potentially attract more investment than just traditional old school kind of rebuilding. So thank you for that background as well. And now I would like to turn to Svitlana Kolomiets, and she is, as we heard, coordinator of the Capacity Building Office of the State Agency for Restoration and Development of Infrastructure of Ukraine. And she's also advisor to the Minister of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources. So Svitlana, the Agency for Restoration was established only recently, and it is tasked with launching the first reconstruction projects. The agency interacts with donors, including national governments and international financial institutions, as well as non-governmental organizations. It also coordinates requests from regions for priority reconstruction projects. So what are the current priorities for the agency in designing reconstruction frameworks? Svitlana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Natalie. I'm also very glad to speak today at this event and glad to see friends and colleagues. Indeed, the agency is recently created on the one hand, but on the other hand, it is building on the legacy of two previous agencies that existed for many, many years in Ukraine. One of these agencies is Ukravtodor, which has been previously tasked to build bridges and roads and maintain them in Ukraine. And another agency is the Agency for Infrastructure Projects. So we are not building the agency from scratch. We already have the central office and almost 200 people working in here. And we also have 23 regional offices down on the ground implementing different types of projects. But in terms of the priorities, it is important to mention that the priorities of the agency are set by the government. There is a little bit of unclarity or misunderstanding as to the roles of different agencies, governmental structures in all this restoration infrastructure in Ukraine, I would say. So just to clarify a little bit, the agency itself is just an implementing structure, implementing agency. First of all, there is a multi-agency donor coordination platform in Brussels that set high-level priorities. There is a government that approves the priorities for the restoration process in Ukraine. And of course, there is a Ministry for Restoration that coordinates our activities. And at the top, at the bottom, there is the agency, which actually implements this kind of projects. As to our current priorities, well, previously we've been working with roads, bridges, as I already mentioned, and now on top of that we have a number of new areas. I would say that we have 5 times bigger scope as of now, as we do have critical infrastructure in our scope, we do have energy infrastructure, social housing as well. So 4 more big clusters of work, and of course capacity building is needed here. We are looking for experience, we are looking for experts and support in this regard. But what is also important, and what I would like to mention here, is that we are restoration agency and Ministry for Restoration, which is not reconstruction, which is a conscious decision, I would say, to choose exactly this word. Though reconstruction and restoration are quite similar terms, which are often used interchangeably, we prefer the word restoration. Reconstruction, in our opinion, is something that you do when you want to physically rebuild the object that was damaged or destroyed the same way it's been done before. When we're talking restoration, when we're using this term, we aim at recreating the infrastructure, the environment for people. We aim at providing services to people, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we will do exactly the same. And here I'm talking not only about the rebuild back better, rebuild back green, which we already know and which were principles that were proclaimed at Lugano conference, but we are also using here here a new approach, I would say, that was introduced by European Commission in 2021, and which is called New European Bauhaus. I believe it's been merged this year when the European Commissioner Sienkiewicz visited Kiev and introduced this new approach to us, to the government, and as well to the Agency for Restoration. And I'm kind of in a privileged position here because I'm connected to both agencies and may serve as a bridge between them as well a little bit. What we're doing now, we're trying to develop this new European Bauhaus approach in Ukraine.
I think we may have lost Svetlana.
Yes, I think
yes,
so.
and she's back. She's back. You were just talking about the new European Bauhaus that you mentioned. That's
Right.
sort of where you left off.
Bring back better.
We want to hear what you have to say here. At least I'm very excited to hear it. So please.
Well, actually, this is a brand new approach which is introduced by and led by the European Commission, and it is built on three very simple, not new values, and three very simple approaches, but combined together they make a lot of sense to us. About the values, New European Bauhaus policy is based on three values: sustainability, of course, which we're talking about today, aesthetics, and inclusion. And I believe that was the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who said that the reconstruction should not only be sustainable from green perspective, but also improve the quality of living and quality and make people feel well, be it for kids in schools or for families at home, etc. So we are trying to build on sustainability, aesthetics, and also inclusion. That is very important, which means accessibility, affordability, and value in diversity. And the process of restoration and the approach to developing restoration projects themselves has to be built on a participatory approach, multi-level engagement, and transdisciplinary approach. We are very happy to cooperate with the NAB project now in Ukraine. I believe we already had 2 seminars for local communities in Ukraine. They are conducted online, and they gather more than 200 participants every time. Hopefully it will bring together even more people. We really believe in this approach, and we try to support it on both central and local levels. Why is it important? Once again, coming back to the start of my presentation, agency itself does not define project. Agency itself does not design projects, and we do not choose priorities. These are local hromadas on the ground that develop projects that have to decide what is important for them, what kind of services they want to have, what kind of infrastructure do they need, and how do they want to build that. So that's why we are trying to support building capacity on the local level as well. I guess I'll stop here and pass over the floor, but I will be glad to talk about that a little bit more.
Thank you very much, Svetlana. And we only lost you for a really short moment. So thanks for coming back right away. This was very interesting to hear, especially this differentiation that you didn't want to use the term reconstruction and much preferred restoration. Which I think that I'm sure you had long discussions, and you still do, about what this actually means, and to be able to work on this new European Bauhaus kind of approach with the different values. I hope we can come back to that later in the discussion, because I think it informs a lot of some of the other interventions as well. So thank you, Svetlana, and I'd like to turn to Sviatoslav Pavliuk, who is head of the Association Energy Efficient Cities of Ukraine. So I wanted to ask you, Sviatoslav, the association works with hundreds of Ukrainian municipalities, and you work to improve their capacity to plan and implement energy transition and energy efficiency programs. You work with the municipalities to modernize the municipal infrastructure and reach carbon neutrality. Now, what are the city's priorities at the moment for reconstruction? Sviatoslav, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Natalie, for inviting. I will take a moment to say one important thing, that the biggest challenge for the municipalities at the moment is horrible loss of people, horrible loss of manpower, horrible loss of knowledge to develop the planning, to organize the work, to actually to work in the municipalities. Just millions of people fled, especially from the eastern part of the country. So that's the biggest challenge for the municipalities, whether they really realize it or not. The biggest challenge is to return people, to attract people coming back, and to restore the ability to function as a community. And that, of course, requires a lot of investments, a lot of construction, a lot of planning. But I would stress that no major investments will be done, and no major reconstruction will be done, and no people will return to on a large scale to the municipalities, especially in the east, until we as a country join NATO. The precondition to any investments is the security of the investments. And as long as we will not be able to ensure the security of investments, they will be rather governmental backed or state-aided money, but not commercial. And the commercial investments, the private investments, are the key for the economy, and that's where the challenge is. So the security issue is the issue number one for the municipalities. Then the second thing, as we are working a lot with the municipalities, I will just mention that we are this Covenant of Mayors support structure. We support 315 municipalities at this moment in Ukraine in their sustainable planning. There will be no build back better approach. This approach will not work if we will not change the approach to planning. Build back better will not happen if we will not change the planning approach, because the way the municipalities are planning their activities, their strategies, their long-term planning, mid-term planning, the budget planning within the year is not really good, and they need a lot of support. That was not really well functioning even before the war. Now, with the fact that they lost a lot of human knowledge, most of the servants of the middle level of the municipalities, of the town halls, were women. A lot of them fled with their kids to European Union. Some of them will not return. And the challenge is basically to have them back. If we want to have them back, we will need, first of all, to ensure the municipal utilities. We need to ensure the energy supplies and functioning municipality. But also we need to ensure that people have the place to live, because there are millions of people who would like to return, but they don't have a place to go. So the issue of social housing which was never the issue for the municipalities. We don't have social housing tradition in the country as in the Western meaning of that. So we have to start building that, at least to ensure that people have the place to return to. Then, because you have a kind of dilemma. You have to start business, but business needs people for employers. But you don't have employers, so you don't have business, and this is the dilemma which has to be resolved. And quite a lot of that solution is in the sector of availability of the apartments to rent, not just to own, but also to rent. And that's also a priority. For different municipalities, the priorities are different. Municipalities in the east, they are basically, they have bad damages. The municipalities in the west, they have less of that problem. The municipalities in the east, like in the south, if you look at the Mykolaiv, for example, where Russians actually they destroyed, and they are targeting the water supply system municipality to increase the suffering of the local population. They have salty water in the system. The municipality is pumping salt water into the system just to ensure that any water in this is in the city, and salt water in the metal pipes is just destroying, is just physically destroying. So if you the piping system, the tubes, and municipalities ending up with the need to replace the whole water supply system of the city. And that's you can imagine how not just it's not about just the money, it's about the time, because that's huge. You will not find the contractors who can do it quickly, regardless of how much money will would be available. So there are different priorities for different municipalities. For the municipalities in the east, they are rather fighting to sustain, to still function as a community. Municipalities in the west, they can allow themselves of thinking about longer term perspective, longer horizon. They can think about the sustainability approach, and in the association, in our discussion with the mayors, we kind of accepted the approach that, first of all, since municipalities cannot really plan long at this moment, they have to plan the pieces of the infrastructure which are being rebuilt. They have to be 2050 compliant, we call it this way. So the carbon neutrality is becoming the target. The municipalities do understand that the money which will be coming to the country will have this climate neutrality requirement as backbone of all the projects which will be financed. So they have to be prepared. They have to be able to plan to incorporate these projects into municipal infrastructure. So if they are not able to plan the whole infrastructure at this moment as 2050 compliant, they at least have to build back the objects which are being now reconstructed or rebuilt. They have to be compliant with 2050 standards. That's absolutely understandable. So well, I probably will stop here because I'll be talking. Well, just let me know if we have more time. I can do it.
Yes, thank you, Svatoslav. And I think you brought us back to reality. I mean, not that what we discussed before isn't reality, but there's a lot of hope in going into the restoration phase and thinking of what can be done. And you brought us back. Well, first of all, we really need to plan and rethink, but the reality of losing people and not having the people to actually, to return, to do the work, to employ people, and to, and have a place to live even. So I think the urgency and also the huge challenge that comes with that real situation right now, I think you really brought us back to that. I think all of us here have this hope and looking forward. So when we talk about restoration or reconstruction, we think about how to do this better and to have even a better future, building on the Ukraine that was there before the war. Yeah, I think you did bring us back to reality, and but at the same time, I think at the end you also acknowledge that with the long-term planning, it will have to go towards more green planning simply by the whole context of the world today, and sometimes even thinking about conditionalities that come with money being channeled into Ukraine. But at the same time, that will enable probably the Ukraine to more easily transition towards Europe. You even mentioned NATO to talk about the security. And that's an interesting point as well, when we think about infrastructure and private investment and the huge risk that is still lingering, that makes it more difficult for investors to take a chance. But again, I think if we, all of the people here are representing different stakeholders, and I think there's a real wish to move forward. And perhaps some of these risks can be addressed in different ways. So, Anna, I'd like to turn to you now. Anna, since last year, IISD has been supporting European organizations to design approaches to Ukraine's sustainable post-war recovery and development. And you have been coordinating an informal platform called Rebuild Ukraine Green. And this platform unites more than 20 NGOs and think tanks. How does the population in Ukraine, do you think, view sustainable development as an important issue, and how to address the dilemma of rebuilding, let's say, fast and cheap versus long but modern, and just building fast because there's such, as we just heard, there's such a pressing need for people to even be able to live in the country. So over to you, Anna.
Thank you, Natalie. The previous speakers actually already mentioned many things, and I would like to also reflect on one of the questions from the Q&A box, asking if there is any studies that were also commissioned looking into the balance between speed of recovery, so how quickly people actually want the recovery to be, and how green and so on. So here I would like to mention a few numbers, although it is of course hard to actually have a proper survey during the wartime, but nevertheless we had different social surveys coming up. So I have to start with the fact that there is no doubt that Ukrainians want to rebuild a better country. A survey that was presented just a few months ago by our colleagues from Society and Environment, Ukrainians define the following priorities in reconstruction. Number one, not surprisingly, and Sviatoslav mentioned this, it's security. So more than 70% of people see this as the priority for everything, for recovery, for living, and so on. And the next ones are fighting corruption, building back better, whatever that means though, because people can define it differently. And also, one of the principles is taking opinion of citizens into consideration when planning the reconstruction. So we are talking about the participatory approach that is also important for people. In this survey, also people were asked if they want a green reconstruction to happen, and clearly it was not a priority. But again, we have to go into more details of what people actually mean by green or by sustainable, right? Although we can be talking about the awareness raising to actually be explaining these topics, it is important, but we have to be looking into more details. In fact, a large majority of Ukrainians do consider that restoring nature after the war is a very important issue. Many support reconstruction of buildings and cities and industries in an environmentally sound manner with very high energy efficiency standards. So when we talk about concrete things, people understand it's important and they highly support it. And also a large majority of the population sees transition to renewable energy sources, transition to decentralized energy solutions as also very important for different reasons. It could be energy independence, better resilience or security and so on. So when we are talking about these concrete things, there are of course also concrete challenges that need to be addressed, such as financial resources available. Even though people are supporting energy efficiency measures, for example, they may not have enough resources to implement them. Control over implementation of different standards, capacity building, that is something that colleagues were already mentioning. In order to kind of, again, give, maybe highlight and give an example to bring more clarity into what we are talking about, I would like to focus on energy efficiency and just to explain how uncovering and dealing with energy efficiency could actually help Ukraine a lot. So thanks to energy efficiency, we can fight energy poverty, which will be and is already a very important issue for the country. We could boost quality of life, and we can achieve many other things. So at the moment, there are many, many challenges. If we talk about finance, at the moment, the banks in Ukraine do not issue loans, so house-owned associations cannot really get any support to implement energy efficiency measures. Luckily, there are some structures in place, such as energy efficiency funds supported by the European Commission and others, but nevertheless, financial resources are limited to non-existent. Second interesting thing is that when we're discussing with businesses, so producers of energy efficiency equipment and materials in Ukraine, they said that the market in Ukraine is now overloaded with cheap materials. Everything that cheap wins. In the current circumstances, of course, it's clear why the price wins over quality, but we can also be working with it and see how that could be managed. Then one more issue is also moving, and colleagues, I think, made really great comments about building whole new cities according to new standards, and we should be moving there. So moving toward net zero energy building standards in Ukraine is important, implementing their EU directives, and ensuring this extra energy resilience that people want in buildings. And we can be starting already now. This requires extra capacity building and so on, but it's important. What about energy efficiency standards, minimum energy efficiency standards in procurement, in public procurement? It's important, and I think we see that it's still not fully in place. It could be. So we are talking about transparency, but what about efficient use of resources? And finally, and I would like to wrap up with this thought, that energy efficiency is not only about, building physically the building better according to EU standards. It's really not only that. What about building, a whole new economy around? As the government and president of Ukraine suggested previously, Ukraine could become a green hub of Europe. What that could actually mean in practice is producing high quality, for example, insulation materials, heat pumps, solar PV panels, which Ukraine has already been producing actually, parts of wind turbines. We also have some factory doing that. So this would drive not only the economy, not only sustainable development, but could also hopefully help return people back. So to answer finally your question, Natalie, we should be in Ukraine more precise when we talk with people about building back better, greener, explaining to them what that actually means in practice, what it means for their lives, and finding those spheres such as energy efficiency that make sense first and foremost for the Ukrainian context to actually have this happening.
Thank you, Anna. That was really interesting to hear also the feedback from this survey that you conducted, and to know, what are the priorities for Ukrainian people. And at the end, you talked about building a whole new economy, very ambitious. And that is actually leads me to turn again to Vladislav Rashkovan, because I know he has to leave a few minutes early, and if he's still online, I would like to ask him from the IMF what kind of economy he thinks, or you think, Rashkovan, Vladislav, Ukraine should be building, and whether there's a place for sustainable solutions and large-scale modernization. You actually already mentioned this a little bit at the beginning. So is Vladislav still online?
I'm here.
Great.
Natalie, if you allow me, I will try to also to reflect what was said by Anna, by Svetoslav,
yes, please.
And Svetlana. But first answering your question, which I think is wrongly asked, if I may say like that.
Okay.
There is no economy which IMF wants to see. There is a Ukrainian view on the economy which Ukraine wants to see. And this is there is no debate who should own the reconstruction. It should be Ukrainian vision, which, by the way, in a large sense, is still pending. You know, we have a lot of short-term fast recovery concepts. There was some attempt to prepare the plan for reconstruction, I mean, for Lugano conference, which you mentioned, Natalie, but the vision per se, you know, the post-war vision is still pending. And I think this vision also cannot come only from the leadership, it should be also shared. So as I was saying in the past, you know, when, you know, 10 people in different parts of the country, you know, close their eyes, they need to see more or less the same picture, you know, because if one person sees a castle and another one is a small house on a cliff, you know, somewhere in Italy, you know, it's I mean, it could be very difficult, you know, to build the same future for them. So this first. Second is I slightly disagree with Sviatoslav. He was, I mean, as you said, Natalie, he put us on the ground, which is clearly, and this is my first advice. We don't need to be in the clouds. The reality is on the ground. You know, the reality is not, I mean, only to say about the principles, you know, both Lugano or sustainability or build back better. We need to put them in practice and not in theory, but in the specific city, in specific street, in specific bridge, you know, which is built. But Sviatoslav said that the private money will come only, you know, after the NATO. We need the security. I mean, it's clear, you know, the Ukraine needs security. People need security, and this is the first element which, you know, people say in the surveys, you know. But we cannot. It's a little bit paternalistic way. We cannot wait, you know, the NATO entrance, or we cannot wait, you know, EU accession to start behaving differently, you know. I participate now in tens of different events dedicated to war insurance, where I say to people, yes, the foreign investors want to have insurance, but they should understand that Ukrainian investors, which invest today, they don't have any insurance, you know. And I mean, also because during the martial law, there is no insurance on the market. So the Ukrainian investors will invest, and I think this will be the first and important signal for others to join further. As we were joking about the monetary policy, you know, the best monetary policy instrument is an effective air defense system. You know, so therefore it's I mean, air defense system, you know, for the reconstruction, this is what we will need probably, but not necessary to enter NATO and to put as a precondition. This could be admiration, this could be a plan, and we need to work things, and the politicians are working, military are working, our military forces are, as for me today, already one of the most prepared NATO armies in Europe for sure. But this is, I mean, we don't need you know, to put this as really as a prerequisite. It's nice to have, but it's not a prerequisite. Speaking about the definitions, what Anna was raising, also about building back better, you know, it's and also what Svetlana was saying about restoration versus recovery. I mean, I would love the agency would be named modernization, not restoration, you know, because and I understand it's not, or maybe the ministry, it's not only about the physical restoration. It's really, we need to build you know, we need to modernize the country, and digital and green are really elements of modernization of the country. And clearly, to become the green hub of Europe, this is a part of the vision, but we need to act, you know, to come there, and this should be Ukrainian action today. And here, you know, I will go back now to Anna's comment, but what Alexei was saying in the beginning, and Anna was also raising it now, this balance or conflict between the speed and result, and long-term result. I mean, sorry for saying that, but politicians will be always focused on the short-term tasks. And therefore, the short-term will be faster, cheaper, and unfortunately less sustainable, less green, less digital, and it will be not a restoration or modernization, but really will be recovery of what we had before, or unfortunately it could be even worse because you do it faster. And this is why I agree with Sviatoslav. The reality is unfortunately like this, but we need to change it. And this is the question to Alexei who is also advising the Vice Prime Minister question to Svetlana, who's working right to say what should be done today to change it. To change that we really focusing on the short term rather than on longer term. When we build a bridge today, how to make sure that it is green today? What should be done? Is a question. I don't know if Svetlana or Alexei can answer tomorrow. What regulations we need to change in order to ensure that, because otherwise, we will have a lot of the fast things. And the regulation, when I was speaking, it's clearly about the fast. But it's to avoid the bureaucracy. While, is what we need to do today to build already the green hub of the future. It's a big question. Because building back better, and this to going back to Anna comment, is clearly building back faster, is building back more inclusively, what Sviatoslav was also saying, and building back stronger. Stronger means that it should ensure that the reconstruction and modernization can resist more intense events in the future, unfortunately, and also to be more sustainable means that it will bring more less negative effect for economy. And having said that, the IMF program, as you know, IMF now is focusing a lot on the climate. One of the I think it will be in autumn, there will be a paper about the climate issues and sustainability for Ukrainian reconstruction as a part of IMF program. And the Ukrainian, the current program is anchored with EU accession. So there will be a dialogue in the next weeks and months, between European Commission and IMF, how to incorporate what Anna was saying about the building back better, about what Alexei was saying about the Green Deal, into the IMF program in the future. And this is why I agree with Sviatoslav. We need to go to practice. We need to go to details. We need to go deeper. And I would take I think Anna was saying about, let's take a city, small city, look at this as an example, as a pilot, and try really to dream. What would you do differently? If this is a city, if you build it from scratch. Let's be frank, Ukraine has not built any city, for 30 years. The most of our cities are, still have a Soviet legacy. We have some parts of the city, we have some districts of the cities built, but they are still incorporated in the Ukrainian in the existing infrastructure. What should be done in order to build a new city, which could be an exemplary, what I said in the beginning, and in Europe? This is a big question which we need to answer. And if your institute, could raise this exact topic, to be practical, this will be a big impact for our, for our reconstruction and modernization. And we may try to do it, to put it also in IMF program as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Vladislav, and I can't not give the floor to Sviatoslav. You also mentioned the other speakers, but you clearly said, at least with respect to some things, you don't agree with Sviatoslav in relation to security and sort of that we have to not wait, but that we have a reason that we might not be able to move ahead as fast and get started, because there are so many constraints, there are so many huge challenges. But then at the end, you also agreed with some points of view that Sviatoslav mentioned, and I would like to give him the possibility to respond to your intervention, and also at the same time pick up on what you mentioned with respect to, let's say, having the regulatory framework in place to ensure that even when things have to be done fast, they should still integrate the sustainability, the inclusiveness, the green aspects, and of course, for longer term planning, even more so. So what do we have to do to ensure that in the planning, these issues are actually taken into account? And I think Sviatoslav has also mentioned the importance of planning and what could cities do to ensure that also short-term pressures can address some of the and integrate sustainability into planning, whether it's short-term or longer-term. So over to you, Sviatoslav, and I look forward to hearing from you and what you have to say with respect to Vladislav's intervention.
And Sviatoslav, just a second, and Natalie, I will now switch off the camera, but I will move, to another device while I will go to another meeting. So please,
so you will still hear the response.
To you, just to be very, to inform you. Yes, thanks.
Thank you, and you'll still hear the response. So that's the most important.
Oh, well, thank you.
Over to you. Yeah.
Thank you for this opportunity to respond. This may take into discussion of an hour. I will try to be very brief. In terms of security, I definitely agree with Vladislav on that we should not be waiting, but I'm saying that all the guarantees, the price of the guarantees will be way cheaper if Ukraine is the NATO member. I mean, there will be no need for additional insurance, guarantees, warranties, and so on and so far. I mean, it will be just functioning a security model. By the way, this is what happened in Poland when Poland first joined NATO. Massive foreign investment started in high-tech production and economy in Poland because these investments were secure, and it's about the security of investment, nothing else. So NATO is economic factor, not military, I would say. I would treat it very differently. Then about the cities, I had a very cynical discussion with the architects in Germany 2 years ago. It was still before this large-scale war. They were saying, like, look, most of reconstructions of the municipalities, they are happening after the city is completely ruined after the war. Do you like it or not? So any solutions which are adopted, any spatial planning for the municipality, its duration is very long. I mean, it survives 200-300 years. So any spatial planning of the municipality is having this continuous form until it is ruined. So in the moment when the city is ruined, basically that's a very good cynical point where you have to replan because the society has changed, technologies have changed, the needs have changed, the understanding of people, what do they want, have changed. So this gives an opportunity and possibility to replan the municipalities rather than restore them as they were. I would argue here that Ukraine didn't build anything in the last 30 years. I will remind you this, about the city Slavutich. That's the city which was built after the disaster at Chernobyl power plant in 1986. That's the city which was built from the scratch in the field in 2 years. Yes, all of the countries of the former Soviet Union were participating, so every country was every republic was responsible for one of the districts. So we have the Armenian district, we have Estonian district, we have Lithuanian district there, and each of the countries were building their district according to their national vision standards, and that makes that city quite lovely and interesting. That's the youngest city in the country with the youngest age of the people. That's the city of most experimenting mayor, by the way, and in terms of energy and sustainable planning, everything. Another city, and I absolutely agree with Vladislav here. Let's take one city. Another city where that's already happening is Trostianets, the city which was occupied, which was badly damaged, where we have Austrian consultants which are working on the spatial planning of the municipality, energy planning, spatial planning, and that's an experiment we have to follow because understanding of foreign architects, foreign spatial planners is different of the traditions here. But do we have very really strong traditions? Well, that's doubtful. That cooperation between professionalism and vision of the Western planners and understanding all their needs on the local level, which has to be discussed. I mean, that can create very good architectural solutions, spatial plannings, and I really look forward for that to happen. One of the biggest aids or assistances which can be provided to us by the countries of European Union is provide this knowledge of architects and planning experts who can help design better cities, I would say this way. Because most of the architecture, for me, Europe, when you cross the border between Ukraine and Poland, you see huge difference, not in the big cities, but in the small towns. Polish cities are cozy, lovely. The same goes to Slovakia, Czech Republic. I mean, they are nice. They are livable. When you go into small towns in Ukraine, they are quite often horrible. So the biggest change has to happen in small cities. That's where we need that Western approach and understanding for how we can build back better. By the way, that's where, because these cities were totally destroyed during the Second World War. They didn't recover well. They were built with a very Soviet architecture, and this is the place where we can make very big change. Well, I will probably shut up here because, well, if I have more time, I will return. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And this just the last point, talking about the smaller cities and maybe the cities that are more grassroots, closer to the people in a way, because they are smaller, would just bring me quickly to Anna before going to Svetlana, who was also mentioned by Vladislav. But I just wanted to ask Anna in this respect and going a little bit to grassroots, small cities, playing a role. I wanted to ask you just very briefly, because we do have limited time. So what you think is the role of the non-governmental organization in recovery, reconstruction, and just building a city from not scratch, but almost. What do you think that, but not just cities in general, I guess, in the recovery phase, but cities in particular? What's your view there, Anna?
Thank you. So yeah, I will be very brief, definitely. Just a minute to say that in Ukraine, civil society, and as Vladislav also mentioned, the civil society space is very vivid, and especially now there was a number of CSOs skyrocketed. Civil society organizations are volunteers, fundraising, help the army, help the communities, and they also connect cities with national level, and since recently also with the international level. And a very good example from recently, we were working with our Ukrainian colleagues with organizations who work with cities, trying to have first projects implemented for critical infrastructure to showcase what green recovery actually is about. And instead of diesel generators, which Ukraine needed during, of course, the big attacks of Russia toward our energy infrastructure. So instead of diesel generators for hospitals, what if we actually have a hospital that it is run on solar panels plus the accumulator and a heat pump? And we implemented this project. It was finished in January. And already now we have a response from the international community. We already have a response from the government who says we want to actually have more of this kind of projects. So once you showcase, it works. And this is why I think it's crucial with what we're discussing today about having not just one object, not just one building being rebuilt in a new manner, but a whole city or a whole small city. Why not, right? There is one town especially I'm thinking about all the time because we worked with it. We worked with coal mining communities in Ukraine since 2017, and they've been really great, really wanting to move away from coal and searching for the ways to diversify their economies. And one of these cities is Vuhledar. It's being completely destroyed at the moment because it's right at the front lines. The city's economy dependent 100% on coal production. But with this example of this city, of course, citizens left largely and so on. But we have to ask ourselves questions. What is the future of this city? Do we want to rebuild it? If we rebuild it, what will be the economy of the city? And what will be the economy of the whole of the east of Ukraine? As Svetoslav was asking these questions. These are small cities, but if we do rebuild them, we have to rethink. We have to make sure that we don't just place people in the middle of nowhere and don't give them the means to exist. It has to be this comprehensive approach, of course, and NGOs play a role again, as I mentioned, because we are this connecting points between different stakeholders here.
Yes, thank you, Anna. And I think you and Sviatoslav will have a lot to discuss actually on this interrelationship of the NGO sector and city and reconstruction in cities. I wanted to now invite Svetlana to respond perhaps to Vladislav's comments, but also given her agency, what you think, Svetlana, how do you think sustainability and resilience can be best integrated in early stages? Maybe you have a view on that, of early stages of the restoration process. Svetlana?
Thank you, Natalie. Yes, indeed. I guess I will do both by one shot, answering the question raised by you, and also comment on what Vladislav said. I mostly agree with everything Vladislav mentioned. I share this position totally. But I also think that positions of Svetoslav and Vladislav are not that opposite. I mean, let's be frank, at the moment, Ukraine is at the stage of so-called fast recovery. The full-scale restoration process that we all expect will start only when the war ends, as soon the war ends. As of now, even taking into account what our agency is doing, I mean, out of all of our scope, the projects that we are implementing or planning to implement now are the projects that are providing very basic services to people, like we are working on providing drinking water, power supply. We are working on roads and bridges that people need in order to ensure mobility, in order to ensure delivery of essential goods and services. We're working on creating shelters for critical infrastructure, etc., etc., etc. So this is just like very urgent needs that we have to rebuild back quickly, and we have to rebuild back effectively. That are the two things that we need to take into account in the first place. But I also think that now, while the war is still ongoing, we here living not at the front line, we have a perfect opportunity, window of opportunities to work on capacity building in terms of rebuilding back better, or rebuilding back or using a NAB approach or whatever we call that. I mean, Vladislav just said that we need to act on that, right? But in order to act on something, we need to be properly equipped with knowledge, equipped with examples, equipped with support, which is still not the case, but building step by step. We're doing that, I mean. And just referring to what Anna said, it will be really interesting to look through this survey, the results of the survey. If you could share with us, that would be really valuable and beneficial, I guess. And what I understand from our experience of working with Hermadas, when you ask people if you want to be if you want to have objects rebuilt back green in a sustainable way or something, they will say, of course, no, we just need it to be done as soon as possible, etc. But when you show people example, when you show the picture, when you describe the potential outcome, etc., you engage people, and the approach and well, let's say the position of Hromada changes dramatically, but it's just the work we need to do down there on earth. I mean, working with Hromada's, working with the real people on the ground. And that's something that we are already doing. By we, I do not mean agency, of course, because we have limited capacity, but I mean all of our partners working here in Ukraine. We do have perfect example of ULEAD project, for example, which is implemented by GIZ and funded by European Union. This project works with Hromada's for many, many years already in Ukraine, and now they have this perfect new initiative, which is called Project Preparation Facility. They will be working with 25 Hromada's on 25 projects all over Ukraine, but mostly, of course, in damaged areas. They will choose these projects and demonstrate on this project how to approach design, how to approach all the process in a very inclusive, open way, and also using the principles of sustainability, aesthetically, and so on and so forth. So we will be having these wonderful examples of how things can be done, how the projects can be designed and selected, I would say. This is the one thing. Another thing which is done also with the support which we are doing with the support of our partners from European Union is regional offices, which are now being created by the Ministry for Restoration. Alexandra Azarkhina, Deputy Minister responsible for regional development, is leading the process. We will be having regional offices in every region of Ukraine, which will have a number of experts like sociologists, ecologists, engineers, etc., etc., etc. And these experts will be supporting Hromadas in development of their project ideas. They will be providing expertise that, as Svetoslav said, Hromadas desperately lacked these days, because people left, because there is not enough money, because there is no enough knowledge and experience and expertise, whatever. So that is something that will be addressed. But once again, of course, 25 projects done by ULEAD or 23 regional offices, is that enough? Not, of course not. It's not enough, because at the moment the agency only has like 11,000 of project ideas submitted from all over the country. Of course, not all of these projects are connected to the consequences of war, and we will not be working with all of them. But just to understand the scale and the ambition of Hromadas and regional authorities, so it's a lot done. And what we can really do now, we may use this time, we may use this window of opportunity to get this knowledge, to get this expertise, and to build our capacity to rebuild back better, green, and whatever.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that. And I think this is really useful. I also liked or take note of this project preparation facility, and really early in the planning process already have the capacity built and also processes in place to make sure that happens, and it doesn't slow down everything, because we do need to go fast. But the more we know and have sort of streamlined, the faster it can be. So thank you very much. And sorry that I have to rush people, because I do really want to give the floor very briefly also to Alexei, because we started with Alexei early on and then didn't give him the chance to respond. So I'll probably go over by about 5 minutes maximum. I hope that's okay. Alexei, if you're still online, and if you have the floor. I would like to just, give you the chance to respond to some of the interventions, and also, come back to sort of how the EU Green Deal and sustainability and resilience can be integrated in early stages from your perspective.
Yes, thank you, Natalie. I was enjoying this conversation between my friends who are well known here. So thank you one more time for bringing us here. So back to the European accession, I would say, even not only integration, but already in accession, we do believe and we anticipate that in January, in December, we will receive, and we will do our best to receive the full candidacy status. And it means that we might open the accession process. And the European Union did their home job and made some assessment of the Ukrainian readiness to be integrated to European Union. And for example, and set a scores from 1 to 5, when 5 is this kind of chapter and this sector is fully engaged and fully integrated into the European Union, and 1 is on a very beginning level. So, for example, the energy sector received a score 4, which means that greatly integrated, and indeed we are a transit country for the electricity, for gas, a lot of others. So and the legislation, is already there. Of course, there is a room for improvement, but we receive a score 4. But with the environment and climate, the score is 1. So it's on a very beginning level. And it's an interesting assessment, because we had a process called the EU we had a document, EU integration assessment, EU integration agreement. So basically, according to this association agreement, we took some promises and took some obligation to implement the EU laws. It was signed 2015, 2016, and like we did our home job in a sector of climate and energy and environment, and we did like 80% of the laws that we were like that we promised to deliver. So currently, the government deliver 80% of what is promised, but the EU, with its Green Deal, with its policies, environmental and climate, steps so further since these 10 years. So we are lagging behind a lot. And it means that all the energy sector reform, all the recovery, all the processes will be like looking through this assessment, and it means that we need to adopt a huge amount of policies, politics, and technical regulation. And we do understand that now we have unconditional recovery, and then it will be conditional modernization, development, reconstruction, whatever you call. And what are the conditions? This is the condition. You're open just the accession process, and you will see what laws like we need to implement, what politics, and it means that the money will flow like with the conditions green and build back better. So there is a clear pathway for us. We do understand this, and together, like I'm working, helping Vice Prime Minister in many issues, but also I'm a senior research fellow with the Kyiv School of Economics, and we are now doing also a paper on a green recovery. It will be very interesting to speak with Vlad on the IMF paper. Maybe we can synchronize some of our ideas, because like when you now examining the conditions for IFIs for delivering the money, there are a huge amount of taxonomies, there are a huge amount of many conditions that are green. You need to be Paris aligned, you need to have decarbonization strategy, you need to have like huge amount of SDGs and ESGs policies in order to receive this money. And what we are able to do now by boosting up this process of green recovery is to help businesses and the municipalities and the region to understand these conditions, to be prepared for it. But like this is a very hard challenge. I agree with Sviatoslav. The huge lack of human resources, there is a huge lack of knowledges, of a capacity. But nevertheless, we will do this because we would like to finish the war, we would like to win the war, we would like to build a prosperous state that integrated into Europe for ourselves, for our kids, and for our grandkids. And finishing, I guess, like the most interesting and the most promising for me is the investment, like it's the business investment, how business could invest in Ukraine, do green projects and earn money. Because I do believe with the state institution, the state capacity, everything will be okay with the regions, with the state infrastructure, with the hospitals, with the help of the agencies. Like we have the capacity there, but the business is the most challenging stuff for me, because it's a different rules and different regulation, how to do a proper policies, not to invest into a stranded assets. By the way, I read like huge amount of paper written by ISID on a Canada stranded assets. Like you did a great job on this, and I guess this could be a role for you in Ukrainian recovery. So thank you very much for bringing us here. I guess this is my also final remarks. Yes, according to the timetable. So yeah, thank you very much. It was really interesting for me.
Thank you very much, Alexei, and thank you for the praise at the end for ISD. I would have loved to give you another round to say something about the most pressing needs, but I think all of you have actually addressed also the most pressing needs from your perspective for the Ukraine recovery. I would just like to take this opportunity to sincerely thank all of you, for sharing your expertise, and thank you for this very interesting and insightful discussion. Thank you also to all the participants who joined us and for asking questions. We have tried to integrate some of them and address some of them, and if we haven't, please we're sorry about that. But for now, I would like to thank you, all of you, and hope you have a wonderful rest of day. And I hope to see you again soon in another discussion and in a happier context, maybe. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.